Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third installment of Debut Revue, a new online reading series dedicated to promoting and celebrating poets whose full-length debuts have been disrupted by the pandemic. I'll briefly introduce myself first. My name is Jian Yoon, one of the co-founders and also a debut poet with the University of Nebraska Press.
Before I introduce myself, I wanted to add that her debut collection was just released on September 1st. It's called Some Are Always Hungry, and I will make sure that there is a link down below. So I just had to say that before I introduced myself. I'm the other co-founder. My name is Emma Hine, and I'm also a debut poet with Saraband Books. And today, our incredible featured readers are Jameson Fitzpatrick, Aricka Foreman, Sumita Chakraborty, and Roy Guzman. Our readers will each read for 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll have a brief conversational Q&A before wrapping up. If you like what you hear, which I'm certain you will, please consider purchasing these authors' books via their publishers, an independent bookstore, or our bookshop affiliate page, all of which are linked below.
We're so grateful to everyone tuning in and can't wait to get started. Before we do, one final bit of housekeeping. We prioritize paying our readers, and we are accepting donations to let us continue doing so in the future. So if you are able to help out, there's a link down below.
So it's my pleasure to introduce our first reader, Jameson Fitzpatrick. Jameson is the author of the debut full-length collection Pricks in the Tapestry, which was published by Birds LLC in June 2020. They are also the author of 2 past chapbooks, Mr. And, published by Indolent Books in 2018, and Morris Row Erasures, published in 2014. Jameson was a 2017 NYSCA-NYFA Fellow in Poetry and teaches expository writing at New York University. Jameson has described Pricks in the Tapestry as a Bildungsroman of sorts, the story of a young poet coming to know, belatedly and with difficulty, the insufficiencies of the self as subject and the lyric as mode. I'm so honored to introduce Jameson to Debut Revue.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be reading. Thank you for the invitation. I can't wait to hear everybody else. So I'm going to read 2 poems from Pricks in the Tapestry. One short and from the very beginning of the book, and one long and from the very end. And I thought they made maybe a good pair or a companion piece of some sort. So this first poem from early on in the collection is called Sometimes I See a Man Who Hurts Me. Just the fact of the size of him, how much he doesn't struggle to fill, the broadness of shoulders that in no sense belong to me, shoulders I can neither have nor climb, if that isn't cruelty. They cut through the air and what else? The way the fabric pulls across, the way the sleeve hangs open when he reaches up, the way the armpit calls me to memorize it, the way he must lower the arm, the way the bicep twitches, the way the back ripples, the way the ankle peaks, the way the band of underwear inches upward, so he must reach in to push himself down again, the scratch while he's there, the way there is no anguish in the face, the way he looks in any direction, away from me. And this second poem, I guess I won't give any preface to, except to say that I've actually never read it for an audience before, which I think is weird because it's actually maybe my favorite poem in the book. So I thought I was going to try it out with you all tonight. The poem they didn't write was about how the company of women had constituted the best of their life, was a love song, advocated for platonic intimacy as the ideal form, quoted Plato, quoting Socrates, quoting Diotima, quoted Tim Dugo's telling Mary Ellen, I want to be a woman when I think I could be like you, wondered, Why have I already quoted men in a poem about my love of women? Quoted Kate, I don't want your face, I want what your face can do. Those lines were from the first thing they ever heard her read, and they never forgot them. The poem they didn't write was about the brilliance of women, their friends, how many of their most enduring relationships began with the two of them recognizing the animal of the other in their poems, was about identification, reproduced Anna Schweer's The Same Inside in full. Whenever someone asked about their favorite poems, they said that one. Also, Anne Sexton's Just Once. Also, many poems by women about men, but just once. Let's leave them out of this. That's what's so great about the Schweer poem, how the encounter with the woman on the street replaces the need for the lover, and how the encounter is not, in fact, a replacement, but the real thing. The lover is just a stand-in. The poem they didn't write always remembered that. The poem they didn't write began when they were dismayed to realize they'd written a book about men. In the poem they didn't write, they felt free to say, I'm not one. The poem they didn't write was an effort to correct the image they saw reflected at the vanity. In a meeting, Samson, just one man, said, it's strange. When he thinks of you, he thinks of you in the company of women, but there aren't many in the poems. Diana agreed later over drinks, adding that it wasn't just about being friends with mostly women, though it's true you were, but also about how women were your strongest influences. Yes, the poem they didn't write would be an account of their literary education, beginning with the Brontes and Mary Shelley, and include everything, all their favorite writers, in the order they came to them, and also their many brilliant friends and their greatest teachers, Marie and Anne and Brenda and Deborah, who also happened to be some of their favorite poets. What a lucky life, they thought, working on the draft. It was also about the imperative to write like a man, which they had never understood or wanted to do, though they had heard some of their brilliant friends confess this desire in spite of themselves. They still couldn't figure out what it meant, except that perhaps the desire to write like a man was really just the desire to be read like a man, which itself was really the desire not to be read like a woman because of men. I don't want your face, I want what your face can do. The draft was didactic, but it felt like they were onto something. They returned to their first idea for the poem they still hadn't written, a personal history of feminine identification in the form of a list. They told Sasha about it as they waited for the play to start. The poem would begin with their mother, their childhood closeness, with their stealing their older sister's dresses and library books, which they used to read in a single sitting on the floor of the downstairs bathroom, door locked. A little girl named Alice lived in the mirror there. She and her world looked exactly like them and theirs, only she was a girl in hers. Then the poem would turn to vignettes of adolescence. Abby using an eyelash curler as a roach clip, Abby in oversized plastic sunglasses, Abby passing them the roach and sunglasses and then taking a picture, the two of them searching her carpet for shakers, scraping resin onto a piece of paper when the town went dry, thanking Goddess when they remembered a nug tucked away in a jewelry box, how hard they'd laughed until they cried or peed or begged the other to stop, each of them weeping once in the arms of the other, sharing a bed. When they thought of their happy times inside that unhappy time, they thought of her room, or ashing a Turkish royal out the window in the back of Megan's car, or later, when Abby got her license, packing the bowl in the passenger seat as she drummed the wheel, or once they got their license, the rides to school with Sophie and Meg, seeing that terrible gay indie film with Aaron instead of going to prom. They and Abby weren't speaking then. And the soundtrack, they couldn't write the poem they didn't without Joni and Carly and Stevie and Patty and Ricky and Liz and Alanis and Fiona and Amy and Sean and Regina and Rachel and Corinne and Jenny and Joanna and Martha. And so the poem they didn't write had to record something of the endless exchange of mix CDs between Abby and them, their epic reconciliation playlist. The nights the only plan was to lie back and listen. Next, the poem followed them to New York, to parties with Martika and bars with Siani and concerts with both of them, who liked some of the same music and had new voices to trade to, further nights to stay up smoking, then to galleries with Dana and Sophia, after parties. But the list became monotonous, all coterie and no content. They tried again. In a blank document, they wrote, title, the one boy at the girls' sleepover, and nothing else. They went to Athens with Elisa, who listened to them describe their struggle and suggested they find a model. They thought about it until they thought of Elena Kalidiak-Davis's The Poem She Didn't Write from her book of the same title. She'd visited when they were in grad school and led a master class. The poem they didn't write was a response to the prompt she distributed, a worksheet titled Irritable Reaching, Blank, and the Psychology of Poetic Practice. The poem they didn't write reached irritably. The poem they didn't write was missing something. The poem they didn't write was not interested in psychology. The poem they didn't write missed analysis while they were in Greece. They discussed gender a lot there, in analysis and in Athens with Elisa. It was a vexing question. They were asking. But the poem they didn't write wouldn't let that in. It was meant to be a celebration, a praise song, simple and hummable, something children could sing in a round, the girls in them at the sleepover. The poem they didn't write was about adoration, admiration, and only a little bit about what they coveted. Some new and perfect lines from Courtney crackling in their inbox. The poem they didn't write couldn't do their friends justice, was just a stand-in, tried anyway, ended abruptly with a recommendation. This book is almost over. When you finish, please read Kate Mahoney, Diana Hamilton, Sasha DeBevick McKenney, Elisa Gonzalez, and Courtney Bush. May you find some joy in their company, as I do. Thank you so much.
I feel like I want to journey with that poem. That was so wonderful, and I feel so full of joy right now. Thank you so much, Jameson. So we're going to move on to our second reader of the night. I am super excited to introduce our second reader, Aricka Foreman. Aricka is an American poet and interdisciplinary writer from Detroit, Michigan. She is the author of the chapbook Dream with the Glass Chamber and the debut full-length collection Salt Body Shimmer with Yes Yes Books. About Salt Body Shimmer, Allison C. Rollins has said, as vital as water is to the human body, Salt Body Shimmer proves just as indispensable. Adorned in the camouflage it takes to be a woman, Aricka Foreman invites us to wade into an iridescent realm of blue magic. She has earned fellowships from Cave Canem, Callaloo, and the Malay Colony of the Arts. She serves on the board of directors for the Offing and spends her time in Chicago, Illinois, where she engages poetry with photography and video and works as a publicist for Haymarket Books. I am so honored to welcome Aricka to the Zoom stage.
Thank you so much. I'm so incredibly grateful and honored to be reading with these fantastic writers who are also celebrating their debut collections. I have long been a fan of each of them from afar, quietly in the Ethernet. So yeah, this is truly a treat to share this work in this space with all of you. I'm just gonna read 3 poems from Salt Body Shimmer. The first one is Between Heaven and the Most Southern Place on Earth for William Foreman Sr. and Emmett Till. I watch my grandfather's morning finger slip each button in, then out slotted cotton, sleeves starched to gleam. Effortless magnolia, he sways throughout the house, limbs bent by his own wind, pooling cologne into his palms, blessing the edges of jaw, arch of neck, having remembered less beautiful preparations of the body. Delta men know their wine, a gift, age, temporary. And when his mouth widens around, darling, I'm so surprised, It's not the promise of what a baptism might wash away, but what a 1955 Tallahatchie River did not. Sometimes I forget which man lives inside my memory. Push against my waking years of him curled beneath the kitchen table, folded over, swatting away snakes only he could see, his howl writhing from the blows of his uncle's ghost. When he was a boy again, too young to understand why his shade of gorgeous made people violently uneasy. There are few love songs for Sunflower, Yazoo, money boys to sing themselves to sleep. They learned ritual, a string of slow breaths between buffing black shoes, until their lungs fill with every fleck of light. When my grandfather pours into his overcoat, I am young to knowing, too, how fragile his return before his musk fades from the front door. This next poem is called Failed Reincarnation Before Olanzapine. My honeycomb illness of bees buzzing bright in the brain, their sticky spittle turning hours in kaleidoscope that slow drift. The trees autumnal gold, how it latches to the shoulders of pedestrians like the take me with you of lovers. Take me across the thresh of whichever door might amp this song up. Good needle jitter, when the station's stuck between suffer and c'est la vie. Who in a body like this can afford to believe in reincarnation, though once I dreamed a river of mercurial silt and gold, bangles bridging over my opened wrist, and the sun's radial rippling despite rising brown water. Here, language in limbo, of leveraging one evening for a hush if you can manage. A whisper taught or torch or touch can bind you to a fever if unchecked. Let. Wound, then bruise renders blues inevitable. From the green porch I swing between the whir of dissolving cars that whip and excel. Panic pitters its baseline like a house track, begs, dance, 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 dance. Asks if you believe in a God who demands to witness what worship wild abandon becomes. And then I don't read this poem often, and I'm going to because it's wonderful and cunty and I like it. So this is called I Got Mad Love. If you were born in the 90s, unfortunately, you probably knew that Drew Barrymore ruled all the movies. And so the title is taken from the film of the same name starring, you guessed it, Drew Barrymore. There's no Drew Barrymores in my adaptation. Lovers watch me spin into snow lines of static, leave the front door open. Couldn't cut out the eyes of magazine girls, paste them blue to the wall, watch tutorials on how to crown my locks electric. I've bruised men without permission, masturbate before dressing for work, beat my face for the gods, keep a good purple eyeliner in the clutch, sit in traffic, punch a clock, smile like I own a thing or two. When bleeding, drink beet juice, pray for a reason to clap back, laugh too loud, call it joy or pay a bill on time. Pretend memory is not a hangover. Find a cure. Viola Davis through a room with no wig. Call a bigot, bigot. Keep hunger for push, fingers against the wall of necessary writhing. I'm feeling myself on the dance floor in the bedroom of my witching hour. Light the mother's candle. Hope I don't salt to ground. I hope. Eat collards out the pot. Drink its liquor. Let my body welch from today's blue pleasure. Don't look for Chris O'Donnell to save me. He was a shitty Robin anyway. Not the 90s anymore, except for this mat, the way I rip my jeans. Some days I am brave, walk to the train without headphones, wish somebody would tell me to smile, the arrow of my brow cutting their spleen out. Come home, take this sheer black bra off before the deadbolt slides shut, pour myself a glass of red wine, let it stain my tits, roast a chicken and suck the salt off every finger, live. Thank you guys so much.
Aricka, that was amazing. That was amazing. I'm really excited to introduce our third reader now, Sumita Chakraborty. Sumita is a poet and scholar whose debut collection, Arrow, is published by Alice James in the US and Carcanet in the UK. Originally from Massachusetts, she now lives in Michigan, where she teaches creative writing and literary studies at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And I can't get over what Diane Seuss says of Arrow. She says, I stand in awe of Sumita Chakraborty's visionary collection, by turns epic and compressed in scope, weighty in its tapestry-like materiality and sleekly dynamic as an arrow. The mythic and literary here are invigorated by seeming autobiography, which in turn gains collective energy and heft from the poem's timeless tropes and themes. It's my joy to welcome Sumita and her poems to Debut Revue today.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Diane is too kind. All of you are too kind. Thank you to Debut Revue, to Jameson, to Aricka, to Roy. I've been so moved by everything that you all have read so far, and I can't wait to hear you, Roy. And I kind of slightly feel like my own talking is a vague waste of time, mostly because I really selfishly just want to sit back and like chill and listen to all of you. I'm going to kick off, as I try to in general, with a poem by someone else. The poem that I'm going to read today is by Lucy Brock-Broido, and it's actually the poem that is right behind my head. Lucy was one of my earliest poetry teachers, and I took her summer school class in her house when I was in college in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's where she held it. And I don't know why she was so kind and so gracious and so everything to me, but I owe so much of anything that I've ever done since to Lucy, who has since died. I've been thinking quite a bit about how very much I wish I could show her this book. Without her, it wouldn't exist. And I hope that in some way this poem of hers, which is also right behind me, goes out to her wherever she is fabulously lighting up whatever post-mortem room she is undoubtedly crushing. It's called A Girl Ago. No feeding on wisteria, no pitch burner traipsing in the nettled woods, no milk in metal cylinders, no buttering, no making small contusions on the page but saying nothing no one has not said before, no milkweed blown across your pony coat, no burrs, no scent of juniper on your Jacobean mouth, no crush of ink or injury, no lacerating wish. Extinguish me from this. I was 16 for 20 years. By September, I will be a ghost and flickering in unison with all the other fireflies in Appalachia, blinking in the swarm of it, and all at once, above and on a bare branch in a shepherd's sky. No dove. There is no thou to speak of. Shout outs to Lucy. All right, I'm going to read a couple poems from Arrow now. The way this book is structured, it's kind of like a story of what happens in the aftermath of violence and how that leads to other aftermaths. I hope for it not to really be about progress and also not to really be about stasis. For me, as a survivor of severe domestic abuse throughout my entire childhood, what has really rung the most true to me is that when you move through, like Louise Glick says, at the end of my suffering, there was a door. It's not like a door to a wonderland, it's simply a door. And my hope for Arrow is that it kind of chronicles the experience of being in a few of those rooms, as gnarly and as objectionable as they may be. The first poem I'm going to read is from toward the beginning of that journey, and the room I was in at that time psychologically was definitely gnarly and objectionable. The backstory, the autobiographical backstory of this poem is, at this point, oh, my cats are fighting. Perfect. 1 second. Oh my God, guys, that's horrible timing. Okay, I'm back. The autobiographical backstory of this poem is not unlike what my cats were doing right over there in the corner. This was kind of close to when I had first started realizing and acknowledging that I was a survivor of extreme violence, and I had a real chip on my shoulder about it. And it made me really angry at just about everyone else and gave me quite the superiority complex and the selfish kind of mindset pertaining to literally everyone else. And this is a poem from being in that headspace. It's called Quiver. Speak to me never again about sacrifice. Tell me no stories about things left behind. Should you dream of telling me such a thing, imagine immediately yourself in front of Orpheus. Know that for the rest of my life, I do and will name everything Eurydice, no matter what else I pretend I have named it. I do not know what my own eyes look like, but I often imagine them like the eyes of a hound fresh from the track. The track, too, is Eurydice. Each lover, 3 dogs, rose bushes, my mother, my sister, my home state, an underground bee's nest, 1 upright black kawaii piano. Here are the words you may not speak to me because I know them better than you could. Toil, sacrifice, hound, Eurydice. Fortunately, I was not a jerk forever. Shout out to therapy. Shout out to therapy. That's the kind of joke that's easier to make when there is a live audience that is laughing. All right, I'm going to read another poem from kind of the middle of this journey. And this is sort of when I was in a space autobiographically where I was kind of trying to dwell a little bit more in silence, reckon with the fact that I had survived and seen some things, but also that there was a future for me in other worlds in which other people were living. This poem is comprised out of words from Moby Dick, a little Peak, Massachusetts action there. Oh, spirit. I wish to lay before you a particular plain statement whose skeleton we are briefly to exhibit. Out of the trunk the branches grow, out of them the twigs, chased over the watery moors, slaughtered in the valley, oil and bone pass unscathed through the fire, and it is only gray, imperfect, misty dawn. Soon we shall be lost in its unshored, harborless immensities, that serene ocean rolled eastwards from me, 1,000 leagues of blue, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Only I am escaped to tell thee. I think I'm going to do 2 more. So frequently throughout the book, when my speaker / literally me is in a point where she's having a particularly hard time grieving something, she has a dialogue, an imagined dialogue with the Greek titan Nyx. And Nyx is a titan of night. And frequently as an interlocutor for my speaker in the book, it's a way to kind of abstract, but also make concrete the way that a lot of the speaker's struggles feel really cosmic and have that kind of cosmic gravity for the speaker. Toward the end of the book, I start thinking about a little bit more about what it means for those griefs to feel that massive and to deserve to be honored as that massive for the individual, but yet not really rate very much on the scale of a cosmic. I mean, I'm talking to a titan about like my sister's death or like my domestic violence. The titan probably doesn't care. She probably has a lot of other things on her mind. At the very least, an ocean of death or an ocean of domestic violence would probably be the register or the scale where her mind operates. So I have a persona poem, and it's one of the 2 title poems in the book. It's called Arrow, in the voice of Nyx, kind of telling me to shut the ever-loving hell up. So let's do that, because I love scolding me. It's very weird. Arrow. Was it I who invaded the day or the day who invaded me? I do, I undo, I redo. I enlarged the figure till it was a mountain. I don't fear the sublime, and I cut off its head, having already cut out its tongue. I have 3 siblings and flocks of children, and though we're oft confused, you must know that I differ from all. I am not my brother darkness, nor my sister dirt, nor my brother torment. I am a time, and I am an astronomy, a geometry I invented myself, an architecture, a divine, and like any divine, yes, I have made kin from unions with my kin. Out of a union with my brother, I made the nymphs, the river, and the boatsmen lullabies. If X is an obstruction, and if the poetry of X was music, then this poem is a musical obstruction. And if this poem is a musical obstruction, then this poem is a lullaby, my kin, born of my kin. I am a space as much as I am a voice. Did you truly hail me for a dim-witted conversation about love? Me. There is nothing like me. I am no more like my siblings or my parents than I am like a placid lake or the gaping from which I was born. I am a charioteer, a bird. Would you believe me if I said I also made the ether and the day? Whether or not your faith is stored in my ear, I am sure in what I have made. How could I be both gentle and dangerous enough for your thoughts? Do you have thoughts? I asked about moon, dark, pain. You only gave me yourself. And as to my other question, it was me. I invaded the day. It didn't stand a chance. And I think, yeah, I've got about 2 minutes left, and I'm going to read one very, very short one. It's the last poem in the book, and I think I will leave the explanation at that. It's called O. Stars are not the end, but the beginning. A bird is to its throat as a promise is to its sharp edge. I wanted to make for you a sun shower. Instead, I've made for you a mortal thing. Writing is knowing how to cut. There is a space in my body that did not exist when I began this book. It is a window. When I next speak, I will do so through that window. Please leave the window unlatched. When I next speak, it will be with changed lips. I wonder what their color will be. Finally, she enlarges the figure to a grand scale and cuts off its head. Thank you so much.
Wow, Sumita. Listening to you, it really did feel like a door to a new destination has been carved. Thank you so much. So it is my honor to introduce our final reader of the night, Roy Guzman. Roy G. Guzman is the author of the debut collection, Catrachos, published by Grey Wolf Press in May 2020. About Catrachos, Patricia Smith says, Roy G. Guzman stomps their unrepentant signature on the well-stomped landscape of the American life story until the hurt, triumph, restlessness, and redemption in these poems could only be theirs. They received a 2019 fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts and a 2017 Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Fellowship. Roy holds degrees from the University of Minnesota, Dartmouth College, the University of Chicago, and the Honors College at Miami-Dade. They currently live in Minneapolis. It is my honor to welcome Roy Guzman.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. This work is amazing. I have so many questions of all of you, and the colors, the sounds, the images that all of you have exposed me to tonight are amazing. So thank you so much for that, and for everyone joining us tonight. I'm gonna read 3 poems as well. 3 seems to be like the number. It should have been 4, being us 4, maybe 6. The 2 of the poems that I'm going to read are from the series called Queerdactyl. There's about 13 included in this collection, and some other Queerdactyl poems that didn't make it. So I'll start with one of them. And what you need to know is that in the series, basically, you have these creatures. There's more than one called Queerdactyl, and there is a mother. So thinking about like a drag ball scene, there's a mother, And then there is this asteroid that is trying to kind of crash this party. And he sometimes goes by the name Dude Steroid. He likes to PC Blaze or Dude Splain. So anyway, Queer Dactyl. And some of the people that you'll find here, Farrah Fawcett, Jane Fonda, make some cameos. Spandex leggings, authenticating my anaerobic exit strategies. Crotch, but a bumper sticker in a heretofore fleeting Waterloo. Crunk repentance. I span our Dune alphabet soup like Jane Fonda's anti-war legs in calisthenic videos. My zenith of hair, a brown wannabe faucet, mean old toucan, pubic papa. He who so feeds on an entire corpus and still starves, helms the colloquium outside the bathroom of transubstantiation. Tonight, a vastly archived Nietzschean nighttime, I anal bleach my Humpty Dumpty stigmatas. Boys conch with crimson Hollywood carpets that disentangle from their cavities, accustoming their catwalks upon the blood clots of their mamacitas. Like a mythic infantry, the thirsty roaches begin to leather flock. I plie before the gas cloud lifting jumbo leaves. As twilight uncrowns the shade, I howl effluvium, switchblade, hue to hue. This next poem is gonna be, it's part of the Queer Dactyl series. I've actually never read this out loud and I was just inspired by y'all. So thank you for doing that. Yeah, here it goes, Queer Dactyl. And I guess in retrospect, this is an homage to WAP. Neither gag reflex nor shrill discourage gravity. Night could chug-a-log, the kind of pulse that hounds for shelter outside the melted, muscular zip code. And don't angels plummet before they're privatized under the Aristotelian method? The stress of what you'll wear when death proposes, sass and pizzazz of a surf swum right? A phallic light strip-teasing to conquer will tug at the throat for subservience until language milks the band-aid of an echo. To shed one's skin was to unmask his fraudulence, thing of chicken-hearted rock, presuming wreath titanium. We renamed all things to delay their expiration. Etymology declined to residue. Wasn't it in the coverage of fire that we turned most introspective? What I could have done to an entire generation. Nothing is as explosive as refuge. Ever since I fell hostage to language, I had expected death in minor to disciple the peeping on fanboys of my modern arthritis. It's as if someone lit a match to evaluate their loyalty to process over fair wage traffic. I never signed up to Cardinal the Rumba, but gradually my ultimatums shied around his cutter as he sulfured. And this one, These poems sometimes are like tongue twisters, and I'm just like trying to keep up with them. But anyway, this one is called After the Tempest, and I definitely want to dedicate this poem to everyone right now that's struggling with Hurricane Laura. This is, of course, for all the victims who are still victims of Hurricane Katrina that were disenfranchised. And it was inspired by Hurricane Mitch, which in 1998 essentially battered Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala. After the tempest, as if to give up counting the slew of brown bodies floating with their eyes wielded to the sky, because we have trained in at least one position when dying, though we disguise inheriting any knowledge of such travesties. The guava trees abandon their bridal veils in the branches of those who firmly believe that dwelling is carried under the skin, not in the limbs of what can flee. And for a moment, his face crosses her face, their hands fractured by the planks. Or you can say recovery springs from slaughter, time in exodus, the bone horticulture under the swirling cloak of death. How is this not about the dissolution of friendship, the migratory birds passing through the neo-necropolis? If we are mostly displaced water, staggered, vigilant, when we drown, we are asking the flood tides to be gentler as we pray away insufficiency. We too will drink to vanity. If only I could trill in the range of loss without forgetting the angst in my body, where the clouds coalesce around the ditch to rename it rain, while the dry blood they call desire. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Roy. Oh, I feel like I'm going to be thinking about that final poem all night. Thank you, everyone, for your incredible readings. I've been, all day today, I've been just shambling around the house like a zombie because I've been sequestered to my home due to the weather outside. But I kind of feel like listening to all of you, I've been dazzled back into my body. So what a gift. Thank you so much.
Yes,
so we have a little bit of time set aside for a short Q&A section. And I'll just go ahead and ask the first question. I'd love to hear about all of your interdisciplinary influences behind your books.
I thought it was going to be a question from one of the last ones, so I was prepared, but I can speak to that. One of my favorite writers is Sheila Heti, who's primarily known as a fiction writer, although her fiction is essayistic and appropriative and wonderfully strange. And I thought a lot about how she writes autofiction, or writes what's sometimes named autofiction, as I was putting my book together. And there's a long poem that's a section that includes a lot of appropriated language from various family members. And I was definitely really influenced by Heti and her fiction writing that.
Yeah, so for me, I'm just a massive nerd. So I have a PhD in Lit and with a certificate in Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. And I love, I'm still an actively practicing scholar. And I think for me, there's no real way, I'm a very bad compartmentalizer, so all of these things really do mesh together for me. There would be no way for me to toggle between one way brain or the other. It's all just one nerd soup. And especially in this book where I'm thinking a lot about how I came to be the various people I have been at various points in time, there is no story of that is not intertwined with other interdisciplinary training and learning, because it wasn't really until I went to college that I felt like I had the slim possibility of anything to contribute to the world. So in some ways, like even when something seems really abstract or outside of me, or I don't know, niche philosophy or something, it is, odds are very, very good. In fact, 100% good that it's in the book, because it's something that helped me feel like I understood something about what I could contribute to the world and kind of the place that I might occupy in it. So.
Without getting too woo-woo, poets are everything. But there's a really, I think, concise and lovely and critical quote by Chris Abani in, I think, his Versus interview. But I feel like he says this often, where he looks for poetry in everything. And so, like the way that the light catches near a bridge with the water that's like trailing behind it, like that's a pastoral poem, right? Even if it's not an actual poem, right? So I think I gravitate towards folks who at heart are poets, because I think that poets, like, to be a poet is a way to see and a way to pay attention. There's so many influences on this book, and maybe it is influence, and maybe it's just like this very kind of broad somatic dialogue that's happening. But like the choreographer Galen Hooks is influential on this debut, along with Seb Deliza, who's this very strange, kind of futuristic singer and performer. If you watch her videos, they're really weird. And obviously I mean that as a compliment, because I'm a weirdo too. There's lots of music influences, not only in terms of songs and artists, but just as like a way to turn the lens on the work. I'm a big visual artist nerd and also a big film nerd, and the collapse of those two is really incredible. So it was a gift to find my way to Jatovia Aguirre's work, who's this incredible, Southern Black rat femme, amazing, real talk seeker is kind of how the broadness of how I'll put her. And yeah, I think have always been naturally curious, but I also think that I get bored really easily. And so instead of that being crippling, nope, take that away. That's ableist. My apologies. Instead of that being a deterrent, I think I look for ways to engage that curiosity and just let it take me to where it's going to be. And often it'll lead me back to Claudia Rankine. It'll lead me back to Tracy K. Smith. It'll lead me back to Viby Francis. And so, yeah, I think each poem is its own little engine that is like thrumming towards something. And then the landscape that's happening outside of its passing cars is a thing to like pay attention to and try to get as much of it as possible. So it's the best way I can answer that question.
I love those answers. I was going to say that there's so much about what I'll say that is very much in communication with what everyone said. And definitely visual art is a huge thing for me. Even I was thinking about the cover of my book. The artist, Rufino Tamayo, he did some extraordinary pieces, Mexican artist. And yeah, I mean, the kind of legacy he left behind, yeah, I'm always blown away. I actually went to art school when I was a kid. So I think that a lot of that sensibility has always stayed with me in whatever I've done. But in addition to visual art, I was gonna say that music is a huge factor for me, and how I wake up and how I function in the world. And I mean, not just, I mean, Beyonce has been, it's amazing. She makes a cameo, of course, in this work. Selena, the Texan, the Tejana singer, makes a cameo as well. And the last thing for me is, I love that I have these objects already here. I love X-Men and comics so much, and I haven't taken this version of Storm out because it feels like if I take her out, like I'm gonna like just break her. So I love cartoons. I love video games. I love different media that allow us to think differently, not just about society and ourselves, but even about like everyday things like colors and sounds.
Oh, I love that. I love hearing people talk about their interdisciplinary, I'm sorry, truck just went by, their interdisciplinary influences. That's so fun. Our next question is pretty general, but I really want to hear about how your debut books took shape, sort of what the process was, and how the final book is similar to or different from how you might have originally envisioned it.
I'm gonna get my answer out of the way because I always feel like it's long and what have you. But I'm gonna keep being a proponent of like the take your time and screw any kind of like capitalistic notion of like the fact that people are already, and no shade to those people, I appreciate you being about my work, I love you, ride out. But like I just dropped this book. I ain't got no new poems for you, girl. I don't. You know what I mean? And so the notion of like driving towards a project has always been a thing that I've tried really, really, really hard to resist. And I think because it's so important for, at least for me, I can't speak to other writers' processes, but for me, it's really important to sit as deeply in my process as I can, which is why I'm pulling in all of these other things and being like, okay, great. I did these like series of poems on the page, but like I wonder what these would look like as photos. I wonder what these would look like as like little film excerpts or what have you. And so I love, and I'm going to mention another, I don't know if he would call himself a visual artist or a filmmaker, maybe both, but Arthur Jaffa, he talks about it as like assemblage. And so he just pulls all of these things into this like, infinitude lookbook and keeps like re-immersing himself in it, and then we'll pull something else, and like after 8 years he's got like all of these pieces, and eventually something like a thread or a figure of a thing will emerge from that space. But you've been sitting in it for so long, like you've made a lover of it. It's been really intimate with you. It has annoyed you. It has haunted you. It has all of these things. And I think that for me it's more important for me to be in that process, and whatever, like the object that comes out of it is a bonus. Like obviously I know that we have to be careerists in some way, but this book was a bonus. I had sat in this process for over a decade, and when I tried to rush it, I think it was like 6 years in, it was not great to me, which was the most important thing. And so it's changed in a number of ways, especially like in the ordering and in certain poems that are featured in the book that have never seen the light of day to a journal and hopefully never will. Like they get to live in their own little cozy corner of the ecosystem of the book. But yeah, it was a long process. It was a patient process in me learning to actually trust myself and not even the loveliness of the gas machine of being like, yo, these poems are dope, let me da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, great. I need to be like swimming in these waters over here. And so I'm really grateful for trusting that. And there's so many things that didn't make it into this book, but are still like brimming at the edges and may stay on the page. They may live in some other form. But yeah, I think the most that we can resist that language and that echo chamber and the hungriness of like, some of it, poets or writers or maybe artists in general, maybe we have like some Venn diagram of like abandonment issues. And so you're afraid that like, if people don't remember that, like, oh, you published this poem in like XYZ journal 3 years ago and now you've completely been forgotten. And I'm like, what? Like, if the girls want it, the girls, I use Rihanna as my key. Like, you can get this body shimmer, you can get this lingerie ad, you can get this album when I say you get this album. But like, I'm over here doing these things. So yeah, shout out to Rihanna always, but yeah.
Co-signing all of that. And kind of, well, similarly and dissimilarly, this book I did not know I was writing. I wrote a manuscript that was my MFA thesis, like, plus a couple more poems, but it was like pretty much that thesis, and it was all love poems. It was about one relationship. It really had this like clear constraint from the beginning. And then, you know, I was out of school a couple of years, a bit adrift in the work, and I just started writing poems that were in different voices with different concerns, and I just knew they like didn't belong in that book. And it was exciting to not feel like I was chasing after something. That book I sent out and out and out and out, and I wanted to get it published so bad. And then meanwhile, one day I like looked at my Google Docs and was like, I've written a whole lot of these other poems. Like, I wonder if they can go together. And that was, yeah, really the genesis of what became the first book.
I'll go next. Definitely co-signing everything that's been said. I think, I don't know. I mean, I definitely agree with everything that's been said. I think for me, the thought of having a book was never a thing that I even grew up with, that anyone in my family planted the seed and whatever. I mean, my grandfather, who unfortunately died in June from COVID, he was the person who literally like taught me how to read. And he gave me this passion for language. And I think, you know, in a language that is not English also. But there's something about, I think, my relationship to language, language as a tool for empowerment, for transformation, for vision, but also as a tool of violence. Those are all things that have been very present for me and continue to be present for me. So I know that this book is something that I know that I kept writing, and I continue to, I think, write towards something. And I don't know what that is. I know that that's something that I'm writing towards is definitely the aura has a sense of resistance. The aura has a sense of like, you know, what happens, you know, what does one do when one's community has been silenced, right? And so I think all of these contradictions, these energies made it so that I wrote a bunch of this book. This was actually, most of this book was actually my thesis in my MFA program. And I think it became my book because I never saw it as a thesis. For me, like I've written a thesis before, and I'm like, this is not a thesis. This is not an exercise in something. This is something that I feel it in my bones, like I'm writing towards something. And how the organization happened, I had a dream. I kid you not, I had a dream where in the dream, I still remember this. I was flipping through this imaginary book that I had written, and I was so conscious almost in my dream that I was like, Roy, try to pay very careful attention to what you see, how many pages, how are these sections divided, because this dream is probably going to like go away. So stay with something. And I still think about that dream. And I think that the organization of the book actually was very much inspired by the dream. So thank you.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I co-sign everything about taking your time. I think the one thing that I would add on to that is sometimes you have to take your time because you're not yet the person who can write the book that you want to write. right? Like, I think I wrote 7 different versions of this thing. It took ages. The first several of them weren't right because I hadn't grown, I hadn't lived, I hadn't, moved beyond the initial impetus to go to the page in the first place toward a place where I was actually telling a story that was for someone else. Because a book, it's for you, yeah. It's also for other people. It's opening a space where you and other people can meet. And speaking personally, I was not the individual who could open that space in the context of these stories until I was. And I think for me, in terms of how it came to be that I realized I was writing one in the first place, I honestly don't know. I really don't know. I just kept trying, and then at one point it kind of happened. I also am not someone who grew up with the idea that I would do this. Coming from a background of domestic violence, in fact, it was scary for me to even begin to write things at all. I really liked, there's a poem about this in the book, I really liked abstraction, and I still do, I love it. But when I first started writing in great abstractions, it was as a disguise because I was told not to tell anyone what I had been through, or else there would be grave consequences, right? And that was a real and pressing threat. So at first, beginning to even be able to write was a trial. Then realizing where my love for abstraction came from was a trial. Then there was a period where I was really blunt and angry and confrontational, getting through that to a place where I realized I wanted to be sharing stuff. That was its own journey. And these aren't just journeys in craft or journeys in learning, they're journeys in living. And again, double shout out to therapy. My therapist is in my acknowledgements for a reason, right? Like, you have to have grown, or at least I had to have grown into the person who could write this book before I could actually write the book. And then when it came to organization, the thing that was hardest for me for that was my sister died in 2014 from undetermined causes, and the hardest thing to do was figure out where to put that death. Do I start with it? Does it come in the middle? Is it where the book ends? And it turns out I start with it. The first poem in the book ends with me bringing it up. And as soon as I figured that out, I had a kind of a sense of where the arc of the rest of it would go. So it all started falling into place once I figured out where to put my sister's ashes, basically, is how I explain it.
Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing your answers. I feel like I'm learning so much tonight. For our last question, we like to ask this to all of our readers, just so that they have a chance to shout out somebody else. So for our last question, we would love if each of you can share with us a forthcoming or recent poetry debut that you want to shout out to our readers.
Can I do 2?
Of course.
Okay, cool. Recent Leila Chati's Deluge is incredible. Everyone, please read it. Read it over and over and over and over again. Forthcoming, also from Alice James Taylor Johnson's Inheritance. I haven't yet read the book, but I've read everything that I've read from Taylor has been just spectacular. And I am so excited to see this book and this mind at work.
I want to go ahead and shout out Monica Sook's A Nail the Evening Hangs On, which came out in February, I want to say. It's been out a few months, and which I have just gone back to again and again since the first time I read it. We were classmates at NYU, it feels like ages ago now, and just always I was so in awe of like her totally singular, particular voice on the page, which I always know one of her poems when I encounter one. And I think it's an astounding book. I'm still like learning how good it is multiple reads in.
For me, this is an amazing, amazing debut. I think it's a debut, yeah. Cyree Jarrell Johnson. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Johnson's work. But this book came out of Nightboat Books. I believe that it may have just recently, it came out last year, but it probably won one of the Lambda Awards. So incredible work about queerness, Blackness, transness. So.
This is an impossible question because I don't know if anybody realizes 2020 is like the year of robust debuts from everybody and their mamas and their sisters and their cousins and everybody else. So since Sumita already said Taylor Johnson, I can cross that off my list, but yes, definitely co-sign that. I'll do then one recent and then one forthcoming. I might try to sneak in two forthcomings. Okay. Recent is Nandi Comer's Tapping Out on Northwestern University Press. It is incredible and dexterous with language. This really beautiful sort of double, triple metaphor of using the masks in Mexican wrestling as like also an homage to Frantz Fanon's theory, and also this notion of confronting a kind of violence and a kind of tenderness within the same sort of space. I don't know, Nandi's brilliant, and I just want everybody to read her book all the time. And then forthcoming, I'm really excited about Hafiza Jeter's Un-American. I've been waiting on a debut from Hafiza for like a hot minute. And I think this is the perfect timing along with so many books that operate in the same ecosystem, but are very distinctive in their own rights. And Hafiza is just rhetorically brilliant, and yeah, Hafiza is great. So really looking forward to that. And I'm also really looking forward to Destiny Birdsong's Negotiations. She just has a really interesting sort of way of approaching queerness and faith and Blackness and femininity and Americanness, and they're so layered and rich, and I feel like it's going to be a book that I'm going to read once and then I'm going to have to go back and like pull the layers back and pull the layers back and pull the layers back. It's all those doorways. So those are two of like 20 that I'm super excited about besides all of these wonderful folks. I'm so excited for your books, for the ones that have come and I haven't gotten a chance to read yet because I'm still catching up on Haymarket reading, but yeah, I have like a huge pile that I'm like ready to dive into.
Thank you for what you said about 2020, because honestly, that's one reason we started this. Just, I can't get over how many incredible debuts there are this year.
I might have to get a second job just to like afford all of the books. Like, I mean, boo capitalism and also Ready to Support, but like, it's so many good debuts coming out this year. It's blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Aricka, can I add to what you the forthcoming titles you brought up? This is an amazing book, and Torian Greathouse is an incredible poet, and this is coming out December 22nd through Milkweed. It actually won, I think it's one of the award winners chosen by is it Amy Nishikumatatu?
You say it like Hakuna Matata.
Okay.
Matatiel, yeah.
Tattoo. Okay, thank you. And it's Wound from the Mouth of a Wound. So beautiful collection.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I honestly can't wait to read all of those. But in the meantime, it was such a pleasure to celebrate the four of you. Your books would go on any list I had to put out of amazing debuts this year. It's just been such a pleasure and such an honor to hear from all four of you. And for everyone watching, we hope you will consider buying their books and spreading the word about their work and our new reading series on social media. We did want to add that we're accepting donations to help us cover website hosting and our Zoom account, but most importantly, to help us continue holding Debut Revue and to help us continue to pay our readers. Please prioritize buying a book and donating to the many current vital causes, but if you're able to donate to Debut Revue as well, you'll find our donate link listed below.
And stay tuned to our Twitter for an announcement about next month's reading. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider purchasing or requesting our readers' books at your local library. Thank you again, everyone. One final round of applause for Jameson, Aricka, Sumita, and Roy. Thank you. Good night.